Hello everyone and welcome to the Grumpy Surfer podcast. I'm your host, Ads Lyson. On the podcast today I have a guy who has weaved his way all over the world with martial arts. He is a former Royal Marines Commando reservist and ended up as one of the best striking and MMA coaches at Renzo Gracie Academy in New York. Please enjoy a Grumpy Surfer conversation with Jamie Crowder. Jamie Crowder, welcome to the Grumpy Surfer podcast. How you doing, brother?
Cheers, mate. Very good. Lovely to be here. Finally get to chat with you and talk about some things that hopefully are a bit interesting.
Where are you at the moment? What are you up to?
At the moment, I'm in Connecticut. I'm at this casino called the Mohegan Sun. I have my main guy fighting is Renzo Gracie. We're the co-main event at the Bellator fights. We're fighting John Fitch, so be exciting. That tomorrow night we fight. We just weighed in about 2 hours ago, and so I'm just waiting in the hotel now just to get some food in a little bit, and then just chill out till the fight.
Yeah, how's it looking? Is it looking good?
Yeah, I'm very happy. We've been working together for a long time, and unquestionably, this is the best I've ever seen him. Like, he gets better all the time, to be honest, progressively. Like most or all fighters should really, but he's definitely made steps in this last, I would say, 12 months that have been very, very impressive. And I think this is one of the best camps we've ever had. So, and it has to be because our opponent is super, super talented. So I think we're going to be a good match for him, and I'm excited to see if we can implement what we've been planning.
Yeah, John Finch is quite a strong character as well, isn't he? And he's the next champion, isn't he, as well?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, his record is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of the best in MMA history, and he's fought all of the best people. I think he was a World Series of Fighting world champion, and he fought for the Bellator title last year, and he didn't lose, but drew a controversial decision with Rory McDonald. So he didn't get a title, but he's certainly in contention wherever he goes because he's just very, very talented.
How was Neyman's weight cut? Because I know a lot of fighters struggle with weight cuts sometimes. I mean, you see some of the UFC guys and, well, a lot of the pros, sometimes they have to cut quite a bit of weight, don't they? And they're absolutely hanging out.
Yeah, that's accurate. People do struggle. As much as I can appreciate the science of things, it's like everything. It's not a perfect science by any means, and sometimes things can definitely go wrong, or even literally on the day. But normally, it's for me. I've always experienced it as being preparation orientated. So, like, if you've maintained your weight correctly, if you're really disciplined and you eat the way you're supposed to, once you've had a series of fights, you start to appreciate and understand your body more. And then if you're around the same people as well, like if you're being trained and coached by the same people, I think that consistency can be very relevant in things like weight cutting, because your coaches know you and you become very tuned in to how your body is. And that seems to be the case with me and Naaman and my other athletes as well. I would say this was, without question, the best weight cut we've ever done. But we've never really struggled to the point where I've seen other people. But I usually feel, and I can't speak with expertise on other people's athletes, but when I have seen those things happen where people are struggling, it's usually down to the things I just said. Poor preparation. They weren't at the correct weight to start the process of dehydration in the first place, or they've just, they've poorly trained, and then when they get there, they're not really sure. They're not with a group of people that they're familiar with, and things just don't go well. But usually I feel like it's preparation that is key to that kind of thing. And then your own personal history with your own previous fights should always be dialed in to help you get to the place you need to be. And with me, I'm fortunate to work with extremely professional people, so it's not that difficult for me. I have a process that I use, and it's worked pretty much every time professionally for me. I've never missed weight. So,
how do you find people actually doing weight cuts? Because people do them in lots of different ways, and you're around that you're around that environment all the time. I mean, how do you find people cutting weights best? Do you find that it's, an ongoing diet thing where it's like the stuff they're eating, or do they just stay natural weight and then they drop like 30 pounds in the last couple of weeks? Like how do you see people's weight cutting going the best way? What's the best way you've seen?
Well, if I can speak for myself. The people I've worked with, as a general rule, and I try to never have my athlete higher than the weight category above them before we begin a weight cut. So if you were, I don't know, if you were fighting at 155, you couldn't begin the weight cut any higher than 170. Or if you wanted to be 170, you couldn't be any higher than, say, 185. It's just a general rule I've used, and it's been very useful. So I have cut more weight with people, but it's usually somewhat detrimental. And for me, I always try to keep in mind that the whole premise of cutting weight is to either give you an advantage or to neutralize any advantage that your opponent might have by being physically bigger than you. So when you start delving into big weight cuts, you start to reduce the significance of what you're doing, because potentially you're dealing with a detrimental effect on your system. So your endurance can be affected. If your weight cut doesn't go well, it can definitely affect you psychologically. So I usually feel like the best weight cuts that I've seen are the people who are maintaining their weight throughout the fight camp, and people who train all the time. People like Naaman, people like I mean, one of the best, easiest examples is somebody like George St. Pierre, who he doesn't really. I mean, he had fight camps, but realistically, it was just more training. It was just more intense training. He always trained, so he maintained his athletic abilities and his skills and developed them, in fact. And then when it came time to fight, he didn't have to, cut down from 220 pounds because he hasn't been training. Like, that stuff is, in my opinion, it's not the ideal way to conduct yourself as a professional athlete. You don't want to be cutting ridiculous amounts of weight because you've been not disciplined in maintaining a healthy lifestyle outside of your fights. So I think it's better to to diet, or not even diet, but look after yourself and just make sure you don't go too heavy when you're not fighting, so that when you do get to a fight, you can easily get down to a weight that's manageable and then cut weight from there.
I'm nowhere near a professional fighter, never will be. But I've cut weights to do a few jiu-jitsu competitions before, and I've never been in that environment. Like, I've got a few mates that are boxers and stuff like that, and they've cut weight and they've done really bizarre things like intermittent fasting and all that sort of thing. And when I tried
Yeah,
to do it, I dropped like 2 kilos, I think it was. Oh my God, the next day I was absolutely drained. I did like 2 fights and that was me. I was like, I felt absolutely written off. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of a your body and your biomechanics, you kind of learn it over time, don't you? It's not just something that you can automatically do straight away because by yeah, physically and biologically, you just can't do that, can you?
yeah, no, it's not a. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I wish that they did away with it. I wish we weighed in on the day, and that was it, right? I mean, in a way, that's, in my view, it's healthier because you're not cutting weight. Any form of dehydration is bad for you. So, and also, you could be the top scientist, but as far as I can read or know or understand, um, people people can't really tell what happens after you rehydrate. You don't know if it's going to affect you. Some people suggest that you're more susceptible to being knocked out or concussed, and depending on the severity of the previous day's dehydration. But none of it's good for you, and it's not good for your organs. And if you do it a lot, if you fight a lot, then there could be long-term health problems as well. So there's no good thing about dehydrating yourself. So yeah, if you don't do it very much and you don't have experience with it, it's always going to be very difficult to deal with. And even the people who do it a lot, you still see them miss weight. You still see them struggle. So it's a kind of a science, but it's not well measured. Not everyone hasn't got the same way to do it, and everybody doesn't react the same to it.
Yeah, I won't be doing that again. I like my food too much, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's, you know, to be honest, it's usually better to fight as close to your natural weight as possible, I think. Obviously, there's advantages to being bigger, but as I say, they become less and less obvious the more you deplete yourself. So I think over the course of the last few years, maybe 5, 10 years, MMA fighters have got smarter about it. Because I do know it back in the day, like 2003, four, they were cutting monstrous amounts of weight, and just because you could make the weight didn't mean it was a good idea to fight at that weight. And I think through trial and error and mishaps, a lot of coaches and thinking has moved towards doing that less now and being more, you know, being more sensible about what you can cut.
You can read loads of books and you can look into loads of YouTube videos. You can be a scientist yourself and almost kind of say that, you know, you're ahead in the field, but like you said, there's nothing really written down, and everybody's body is very different.
Yeah, for sure. It's like again, like I don't know one way to do it. I know some ways to do it. I've used different methods to different people because it's what makes them comfortable. But it becomes a personal relationship then between you and your athlete, and then you decide what works best for them. Some people like to run around and jog around in their suit, and then some people like to go in the sauna. Other people like to do it through a bath or a combination of different methods. And it's just, unfortunately, whatever you do, it's going to be pretty unpleasant, you know.
Yeah. Mate, what I'd like you to do is just get a little bit of background on you for everybody to understand where you're coming from, because at the moment you're currently the Muay Thai and MMA coach at Renzo Gracie, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, I'm running the MMA program there. There's a number of amateur and professional guys fighting there, so I've been fortunate enough to be able to look after those people. And Henzo's took me under his wing a long, long time ago, and allowed me a place to train. So that's what I've been doing for. I've been at Henzo's for about 17 or 18 years,
Oh,
and
really?
then yeah, I've been there since 2003, 2002. So I've been training there for a while, and I was always coaching fighters, but the academy grew considerably over the years. And then I have a great friend and fellow coach, and one of my original Thai boxing teachers, Joseph Sampiri, who's a wonderfully talented Thai boxer and great coach. One of my go-to guys all the time. He helped me, you know, a lot with understanding and setting up my own way of teaching the MMA and structuring some classes and things. So that's what I've been doing there for probably about 4 years, as far as the classes or the group is concerned. And it was primarily based off of naming, because after I started coaching naming, um, we we had people in, but it was inconsistent. So we needed more people. So one of the ways to do that is to make them. You know what I mean? So we would just build people up who wanted to compete, and then eventually we had a nice little stable of pro guys and amateurs. And also it's Renzo Gracie's Academy, so there's always people coming in, like phenomenally gifted, talented athletes from all over the world, just popping in to train or to say hello. So that was always cool too. That's always happened while I've been there. So you get to learn and kind of have great conversations with people who are like-minded. So that was really helpful.
I get what you're saying with the people coming from all over the world. It must be quite like a humbling experience sometimes, because I remember, I mean, the first time we sort of had any form of conversation was before the Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal fight last year. You sorted me out with a few training sessions there, and thank you very much for that. By the way, that was awesome.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm glad you had a good time.
yeah, it was quality, mate. And we rocked up there, and you had, you know, a load of MMA fighters, UFC fighters. You know, even Buchecha was there, and you know, a few of the other
Yeah,
top level jiu-jitsu guys. And I mean, it's easy for you because you kind of work there, but I guess it could be quite a intimidating place sometimes when you've got all these high level guys coming through the door, but also quite humbling as well, because you probably get to train with a lot of them as well.
yeah, absolutely. I think, but you're spot on with both of those statements. I mean, it is. I think the Henzo Grace Academy itself is a very intimidating place, just by the very nature of where you are. But then exactly like jujitsu and good martial arts, um, I think they're very humbling. It's a really nice measure and reminder of what's out there and what's available. And for me, I've had pretty much some of the most significant experiences of my life in the academy, like conversations that have changed my point of view, or physical training that's just constantly reiterating and helping me create better habits, or different ways of doing things. It's just been it's a great place to be. Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm very fortunate to be there. I know that I've been there a long time, so I also feel very comfortable there, and I don't ever want to create an environment where people do feel intimidated. So I've always been of the mindset, and I've also been brought up in the martial arts by people like Henzo and John Danaher and Gene Dunn and many other people who constantly, for me, reflect that humble side of the martial arts, and making sure that you do your best to include everybody, because it's without everybody, it's impossible. You can't be an elitist and think that you're gonna develop the people in this and yourself in the way that you need to. You need as many. I mean, maybe not absolutely everybody, but you need as many people on the mat as you can get from all walks of life, so that you can. I think you can fulfill yourself properly then, because it's not just about achievement; it's about sharing what you're doing. I think.
Mate, I want to talk to you a lot more about this a little bit later on, but talk to me about where you grew up and how you got into martial arts to start with. Let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah, sure. So I was around 5 years old. I was raised by my grandparents. So my mum was wonderful. She knew at that point in their life it was the best place for me to be. So I was allowed by my mum to go and live with them. Still had contact with my mum, but I grew up there with my grandparents, and one of my uncles, he was probably about 15 years older than me. He was still at home, so he was running around doing like karate and doing all this like push-ups in the house, and just being, a 20-year-old lad just training and stuff. And that was obviously like that was around the era of Bruce Lee and things like that. So I was caught up in that with him, and as a little boy, I always wanted to be like my uncle. So by the time I was like 10 or 11, I was looking to do something. I wanted to do boxing. I wanted to do karate like he did. And by the time I was 13, I was training in Goju karate, which was a small school by me in Morton, which is a small village just outside Liverpool. And so I ended up training from when I was 13, and then I never stopped after that. And I had a fantastic instructor. His name was Keith Pace, and he taught karate, but he was also, a street guy. He used to grow up in rough areas, and he used to be a bouncer. So like his version of karate was very much mixed in with real kind of experiences that he had. So I was very fortunate again to be there. So to be at a young age and be brought into the martial arts in a way which I think was extremely beneficial for me. It gave me discipline and a respect for hard work, that physical hard work and hardship. It was tough classes. So it just framed the whole experience for me really well. I don't think I would be in this position at all if it wasn't for him and for his way of teaching. Because if you go in martial arts early and you have a bad experience, it can totally throw off your entire future, because you think that that's what the martial arts is. And so I've seen that. Unfortunately, I've seen that a lot. But I realized how blessed I was to have that teacher. And then he was also very enthusiastic in going around and trying different things. So by the time I was 17, 18, I was boxing. And I ended up boxing with a gentleman called Stevie Goodwin. He was a coach in towards Chester area. And he used to coach a lot of professional boxers. He was very good. I believe he had involvement with Robin Reed, who was a European or maybe even a world champion at the time. So I got really great instruction from him and a few other people in the area. So I was boxing, and then I moved on to kickboxing. And a friend of mine called Carl Kilbride, he was a local British and European champion, fought for world titles, been all over the world fighting. I'm still very good friends with Carl. he took me under his wing as well, and we started really training quite seriously. And then I fought with Carl. I had a couple of boxing fights and then a couple of kickboxing fights. And at that time, just around that time, a friend of mine was in the reserve, Royal Marines, and I really admired this guy because he was just like the fittest person I'd ever met, and super determined, and he had a very big influence on me. And so I started taking him to karate with me and doing kickboxing and stuff. He was a bit older than me, probably about 10 years older, but we got on really well. And he was like, you should think about, trying for the Reserve Marines. And so I knew how difficult that was, and the kind of reputation that the Royal Marines had. So that was a little intimidating. I was only probably about 19 or 20 at the time. So I did some fizz nights with them and I really enjoyed it.
What year was this?
But this was, I would say this was, let's see, 1990, probably like 1992, 93.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then I eventually got I was always a bit of a wanderer, and so like I got a bit, I don't know how to put it, but I got a bit, probably just a bit fed up with the situation I was in. So there wasn't really much work. It was kind of a hard time to get work and stuff. I was a carpenter. I'd served my time as a carpenter, and once I finished my apprenticeship, the company just let you go. So I'd work, but it wasn't consistent, and I can't say where it comes from, but I've always had a sense of like I want to know what's out there. So nobody else really, I would say, in my family is like that, or my friends weren't really big on traveling or doing stuff, but I was. So I was always a bit of an individual, I think, because nobody I knew did karate except for my uncle, none of my friends. So I always did what I wanted. I still maintained my friendships, but I just did what I wanted. And in the end, I was like, I've got to get out of here. So I I had a car. That's all I had. So I sold my car, bought a ticket, and applied for a visa to Australia. And they gave me a visa. So I just buggered off for like a year and went to Australia. That was amazing. That was good as well. That was a significant moment in my life. I think it matured me emotionally, totally unexpectedly while I was out there. And that brought me a lot closer with my grandparents actually, because by the time I come back, I had a different appreciation for things.
Did you just do a bit of traveling around there, or did you go out there purposely to train a bit of karate, or did you just want to go and see a bit of the world?
Yeah, I mostly just wanted to get away and see what was out there. I was super interested in just not being where I was, to see if my ideas about the world were correct or not. And I certainly got my answer while I was away. I was in Australia for about 10 or 11 months,
Oh,
and then
nice.
I was there for almost a year, and I traveled all over. I worked, did all kinds of crazy jobs. I did a little bit of training there. Did some Thai boxing in Australia, which was really good. And then I came back through Thailand, and that's when I really became a lot more enamored with Thai boxing. So I went to see a few fights, and I didn't train there. I was just traveling, but I really enjoyed it. And I was like, I knew about Thai boxing, but I had never, been to a place where it was just so revered. And
Did you go to a few of
after
the
that,
Did you go to a few of the backstreet like 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 arenas? Because I remember when I went there, it was just surrounded with bars, and then you just had like these rings just knocked up in the middle of like some wooden shack somewhere, and then yeah, it was kind of a crazy place. It was one of the places I really wanted to go and look at as well, and I spent quite a bit of time just watching the fights and stuff there.
yeah, it was like that for me. It was because I didn't really know a lot about the sport or the martial art, and I didn't know anybody there. I just kind of stumbled upon things. But for me, you're right. Like you'd be walking through some forest and like on some island somewhere in Thailand, and then like you'd come across some little village hut, and the next thing you know, in the back of the huts, there's like a boxing ring, and I was like, what the hell's going on? It was
Remember,
kind of
those are
cool because
blokes that absolutely nails as well, aren't they?
oh my god, I was like, don't like people like 9 stone, 8 stone, little tiny fellas, and they would absolutely murder you in a fight, you know. So yeah, that was really good because even though I had a lot of respect for Muay Thai, I didn't really have an appreciation like I did until I went in and I saw it for real, and I was like, wow. So when I came back, I wanted to look further into that. You know, that was one of the things that gave me an interest in looking for it. Um, so yeah, I basically my visa ran out in Australia, and I was running out of money. So after I was in Thailand, I came back to the UK, and I was happy to see everyone, but I wasn't especially happy to be back. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing, which was carpentry and stuff. I didn't have anything against it, but it wasn't a passion. And so my friend who was in the Royal Marines, he was in the reserves. He encouraged me to try it for that. So being a bit of a non-committed bugger that I am, I was like, well, you know, I definitely would like to try, but I don't know if I want to go in for 4 years or whatever. And so he was like, you should just come with me to the reserves. So that was another phenomenally important thing for me. So I went and I applied and they accepted me in March '97. I went in. That was my troop, and again, I've never felt like I was athletically. I don't think I'm not gifted in anything, but I don't think I'm particularly gifted athletically. I'm not faster than most people. I'm not strong. I'm just, but I was determined, and I also feel like if I had anything, it was probably physical, robust, like properties in my body. I think because like I would never get too badly injured, or I would never get too sick. So I was around a lot of really talented people and fit people in the Marines, sorry, as a recruit, and a lot of those people fell off. You know, they like, especially as a volunteer, it was easy to just not show up anymore.
Yeah,
So
that was
I
the
found
same
that
for me
interesting.
really because I was I would say I'm just the average person, and when I joined when I was 18, I played a bit of rugby. I was a bit of a
Yeah,
sprinter, and I didn't actually realise that the Marines was all about endurance. So when I turned up and we were doing like 3 milers, 4 milers, 6 milers, 8 milers, I was like, "How far are we going?" And yeah,
yeah,
it was a bit of a culture shock for me, if I'm perfectly honest. But like you say, I was never the most physically gifted person in the world, but I was always the person that was like, "Do you know what? I'm not going to let it break me, and I'm just going to carry on regardless of how hard it is. Just keep going." And that
yeah,
mentality sticks with you, and I think that's a very transferable thing. I think.
yeah, 100%. Like that's one of the things that was so valuable. Like I think the big thing for me is I'd already, for me personally, I'd already trained a lot and had some fights and things. So physically, even though the training was very, very difficult for me, um, I felt like I could handle it, to the extent that the people around me were handling it as well. So we had your oppo and you got your people around you. So you're like, all right, I can do this. I'm not on my own. And also I'd had fights and things. So I had a bit of tenacity about me and determination. And then I'd been away and, traveled, and I felt like I wasn't a kid. I was like, I was a man, and I knew how to deal with stress and stuff. But the professionalism and the the mythology about what was going on around me that definitely was a huge thing for me, especially in the way that since I've been teaching and been around athletes and the way my life developed. I mean, I didn't know I was going to be doing what I'm doing, but the Marines have 100% shaped that for me. My attitude towards training and stuff, definitely. And the people I met were just, even now, I have such admiration for those guys, the lads who took me through training, and I'm still friends with a couple of my, well, they were corporals, now they're sergeants or sergeant majors, but and some of them have retired. But um, I've got the highest respect for those lads. They shaped me without me fully knowing it either. There's years and years after stuff would be happening, and I would say things or do things, and sometimes you catch yourself, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the 100% coming from the Marines. It's. I'm very grateful for my experience.
After you got your green lid, did you do much with it afterwards? Did you manage to go away or anything?
No, I didn't because as was like I was in a kind of a dilemma. I was like, what shall I do? Shall I? Because at that point, my thoughts were to go potentially to go full time or even try for SB or something. Because I was like 24 then, I think, and I was still young enough, I suppose. But I also was like, I kind of want to go away again. And a friend of mine was in in New York, and basically was inviting me out to come and work with their kids on this summer camp he was working in. Actually, it wasn't New York; it was here where I am now. It was in Connecticut, which is the neighboring state. So I decided, you know what, if it doesn't work out for me over there, I can come back and maybe explore this further. And I ended up going to Connecticut and working with these kids in summer camp, and I would do rock climb with them, take them on walks. It was really good. It was great, and that lasted for about 6 months. And I came with the intention of coming to New York, to the city, and seeing if I could live and work there. It was difficult because it was difficult to get any kind of visa or things like that. But I managed to get an extension on my visa from the place I was working, and then in the end, a long story short, I started fighting out there. I started boxing and kickboxing. Yeah, I ended up winning Welt in 2003, and I got another visa, and then I won a national Thai boxing champion at lightweight in 2005, I think it was, and so I was able to, you know, uh, get more work and then prove that I was a valuable asset. So, and then I was able to stay permanently. Um,
What gyms were you training out of there then?
Initially, I was there's a gentleman from Manchester called Phil Nurse. He's a very talented Thai boxer. Been doing it for God knows how long, and he used to train with Master Sken, and he was British and European champion, and he had a friend of his, Bobby Beckles, another British and European Thai boxing champion, and Bobby was living out here, and he met me in a boxing gym called Gleason's, a famous boxing gym in Brooklyn, and I was there training, doing some amateur fights there, and I met this lad Bobby, and he introduced me to Phil, and Phil was one of the pioneers really of Muay Thai in New York. Um, Oops, sorry,
That's right.
um, my phone fell over. Yeah, so he was one of the pioneers of Muay Thai. Phil was, and so I ended up connecting with him, and so he was probably my first proper Muay Thai teacher, and he was just and is a supremely gifted athlete, and he taught me and allowed me to teach for him in the end. And he had a student called, who I mentioned before, called Joseph Sampiri. He's another extremely talented Thai boxer and a very, very good teacher, very insightful and very innovative. So we kind of trained together, me and Joseph, and we fought and fought for Phil. I was there probably about 3 or 4 years, but Joe was there a lot longer. So that's how I initially started Muay Thai in New York, was with Phil and with Joseph Sampiri.
I thought you said your coach was Master Ken, and all I had imagined in my head was the guy in the red gear that does all them stupid videos. I thought that.
Yeah, I love that guy. He's brilliant.
So you one
Master
of the
Ken.
main, yeah, you're one of the main coaches at Henzo's, and Master Ken was your coach.
Yeah, Johnny Bullshit artist. I'm like, hey,
Yeah, we could
that's
cup anything, right?
yeah, exactly. That's brilliant.
How did you end up at Henzo's then?
Well, the gentleman mentioned before, Bobby Beckles, the lad I met at Gleason's when I was boxing sparring. He was really, he's still a good friend of mine, but he was really, really helpful for me. He was like, when we were boxing together and started to get to know each other, um, he asked me if I was looking for any work, any kind of job or anything, because I was new to New York. And so what I was doing wasn't enough. So I said, yeah, I'll do anything. And he goes, I work in a nightclub doing security. And so I was like, all right, cool. So I ended up working in a nightclub for like, I think 3 or 4 years. And it was that, I mean, that would be probably a good few hours of stupid stories there, because I'm not a very big person. I'm not exactly an intimidating human being. So like,
Give us one of your best ones then.
well, so there's just lots of stuff. Like, it's a different culture in a way in New York, and like when I first started there, it was a really good club. It was really cool, but like, sometimes you'd have trouble, and like I didn't really understand the difference in culture. So if there was any sign of any kind of trouble, I'd just fight people. Like, and of course I'm small, so everyone would pick on me because all the other bouncers were massive. Um, and so I was fighting all the time, and the manager pulled me in one day and was like, "Listen," and he was cool. He was cool because he'd worked with other people from Europe and stuff. So he was like, "Listen, I have to have the talk with you." And I was like, "What's this talk?" And I was all nervous. I thought he was gonna sack me. And he was like, "I understand that you come from a different place, but these people aren't gonna fight you. You've got to stop beating everyone up or fighting with everyone." And I was like, "Oh." And then I started, over time, I started realizing this isn't true of everybody in New York. Of course, there's plenty of tough people out there who'll certainly hand your ass to you. But for the most part, people just say stuff and they mouth off and they shout and they act tough, but they don't do anything. And I wasn't used to that. Where I'm from, it's like if you say something, it's on. So don't say anything. So anyway, that was kind of a funny thing for me because I was like, oh. And so after he had that conversation with me, I was much more successful in staying out of altercations.
You come a little bit more articulate the way that you put yourself across.
Yeah, and like I realized that I wasn't in much danger most of the time because people they just weren't made that way. They weren't like there to do that. Somewhere, but most of the time it wasn't that way.
I bet you thought you were
Uh,
like in the film Roadhouse, weren't you, with Patrick Swayze?
yeah, I thought you'd be bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that was actually a time when I started jiu-jitsu around about 2002 because
Okay.
yeah, I was in there one day and this lad was just this like one of the customers was just like fighting and like he choked someone unconscious, did something else to someone else, and I was like, "Oh, that's impressive." So when, so, so I avoided fighting that guy, and threw the other people out. And then at the end of the night, he was leaving, and I had a conversation with him. He was a gentleman, and he had the messed up ears and everything, and he'd done some kind of sambo or something, but he told me about Henzo's, and so I asked around and eventually found out where it was, and I showed up. I used to go there. I started going there because I wanted to learn what he was doing to people because it seemed a lot more humane than hitting people. And that's when I started. Probably 2002, I think.
Did you know about the Gracies around then, or were you
Oh
aware of,
yeah,
like the UFC and stuff as well? Because that was like what started 91, 92 when it became commercial, didn't it?
yeah. I did know about it. I certainly knew about the Gracies. I knew about the Gracies in the early '90s because my karate instructor gave me an old VHS tape to watch because he was super impressed with them, and no one had ever heard of them really. Well, not where I lived anyway. But I was like, oh wow. So I knew who they were, and then after the UFC, of course, started realizing the importance of what that was and what that element of fighting could do for you. So I was always interested. It just it took me a little while to come around, but when I did, I was super grateful as well. That was a game changer.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite an eye opener, isn't it, as well? Especially guys that I know have been strikers, the majority of their life, and then as soon as you stick them on the ground, I know it's a cliche where it's you're a fish out of water really, or like you got the sharks circling you and you're the little fish there and you don't really know what's going on, but it is pretty much that, isn't it? I mean, I was always the one that kind of criticized people from doing it because I was into a bit of surfing and then I did some weights and a bit of fizz, for what 10, 15 years while I was in the Marines, and I saw people doing it. People like Martin Stapleton.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was good mates with Stapes. We were in the
yeah.
same company, same troop. We were in the same room together as well. And he was
Oh,
always off
cool.
training and stuff. And you know, I mean, I didn't criticise anything, so just get my head filled in. But but you know, I was always that, yeah, I'm not really that interested. And then when I actually started doing it, I was like, do you know what? This is actually pretty cool because there's so many different ways of doing things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand that mindset. I don't know if I came from it consciously, but I definitely had a subconscious bias towards punching and kicking. And I think that's normal, especially for Britain, because that's the nature of our martial art, right? Like we're not known for being grappling people. I mean, we obviously have catch wrestling, and I don't mean there's no history, but it's not what we're known for. So like, um, I wasn't particularly uh, keen on learning it until I was a little older, and then I saw the effectiveness of it, and I was like, oh, I should at least learn that. And then after I started doing it, it didn't take me more than a few sessions to be like, this is incredible. This is like something that I didn't understand, and now that was it. Then I was like, oh, this is incredible. So again, it was just I really feel fortunate that I had the right people around me, and um, you know, people were very welcoming. And I think for me personally, it's the most important martial art for me. And it allows you to look after yourself without hurting other people particularly badly. And if you need to do that, you can. But I think it's more of a choice, as opposed to a striking art where really don't have any control over the damage you're doing. It's very difficult to control what kind of impact you have on people when you're hitting them or throwing them around. It's tough. I mean, I think there's an absolute need for it, but jiu-jitsu isn't like that. It's like, what do you want to do? And it's more of a choice. It's like if the other person, especially if the other person doesn't know anything, you've got a really good chance of coming out on top.
When you went back to Henzo's and started doing that, did you do much wrestling as well? Because, you know, I train with some guys that are MMA guys here. They train at a place in Exeter called the Lion's Den, and I find a lot
Yeah,
very sort of like wrestling pin based, whereas
yeah,
their fundamentals are very very good, and they're good at holding you in one position to utilize that. I mean, obviously, you know, when we're grappling, not punching the crap out of each other on the floor, but you know, you can see kind of the purpose of where they are. You know.
yeah. I think, yeah, absolutely. I think everything has its use, particularly when if you're with people who are not necessarily as educated. It's just so to me, it's very obvious, like that skill sets are significantly uh, or obviously more relevant when the other person just doesn't know what you're doing or has less information than you, and you're able to just do things that other people are just completely unaware of. They don't know they're in danger, or they're unaware of the vulnerabilities of this situation. So if you're a kickboxer and you've never done a day of wrestling in your life, once you start wrestling, you're just going to get your ass kicked, and like understandably. And the same for a person who's maybe a wrestler who fights someone who's wrestled and can kickbox. Like it's like these things start to show up, and it's not like you have to really prove it. It's been proven for the last 25, 30 years. Like you can see the things that are effective and the things that aren't so effective. And the beauty of it for me is it's still in such an early stage that we're still learning, day by day, and you're seeing the development of jiu-jitsu, particularly at the moment. And then other forms of martial arts are coming um, into the into the mainstream. I think people like Lyoto Machida and Wonderboy Thompson are bringing karate into the octagon with phenomenally effective results. So I like the whole idea of the application of the numbers. You put things together, and that's how you become, I think, more effective. Because it's impossible to think of anybody in an MMA fight not knowing jiu-jitsu. I mean, it's ridiculous. So you have to know the fundamentals of these things, and the same with wrestling, or the same with judo, or boxing, or kickboxing, or Muay Thai, or karate. There are elements of these things that have taken us a while to understand, and we still don't understand it. I don't think particularly well at the moment. We're definitely getting a lot better, but I think it's got a long way to go.
Have you watched much of the Karate Combat stuff that came out? I think it was maybe a year, 2 years ago. You know where they've got the elevated floors, so it's kind of like in a
Yeah,
big square, but they've elevated the sides up, and then if you knock someone down, you've got, was it 10 or 20 seconds to potentially do a bit of grappling and stuff with them as well.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
I've seen that. Yeah,
it's quite cool, but you kind of like that when someone gets taken to the ground, you're like, fucking jump on him.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting for me, like, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, because I respect whatever anybody wants to do in sport. You know, if you can do whatever you like. It's just that for me personally, uh, maybe I'll change my mind, but for me, in the last 20 years since I've been doing jiu-jitsu, um, this is the ultimate thing for me because it's like it incorporates everything. So if you want to reduce those things and be like, you know, it's like Sandar, something like that, which I have great respect for. It's not for me. It's like I'd rather just do MMA because these things seem to be like if you do boxing, you're good with your hands, but that's it. If you're a Thai boxer, you're good with your hands, your feet, your knees, your elbows. You can clinch. That's why they put these things together. And so, like, I much prefer to train in a collective version of things than a reduced version. That was the whole point of me doing other things. I was like, all right, I started with karate and I loved it. And it was great. And then I was like, oh, I feel like boxing has got something to say about punching. Maybe it's more versatile, and I thought that my karate was. So I didn't stop doing karate, but I started doing boxing, and it 100% helped my karate. And then I stopped doing as much boxing and started doing kickboxing because I sparred with a kickboxer once and he kicked my ass, and I was like, oh. Will you teach me? And he was like, yeah. So then he started teaching me. And then I went to Thailand and I was like, oh. And it just became less and less rules and more skills. So that's always been my motivation is like, I want to be able to look after myself. And then I also want to develop the most fulfilling skill sets that build off each other.
Yeah, so you started doing jiu-jitsu, started training at Henzo's. How did the development of you becoming a coach there, how did that develop? Just time served there and then they just asked you?
Yeah, I came there within a year of being there. I'd won a US kickboxing title, and some of the guys found out, and one of the guys was managing Henzo, and Henzo was fighting in Japan then in Pride, and as Henzo got older, he got bigger, like physically, he just got bigger. But at that time when I met him, he wasn't that much bigger than me, and so they asked me if I would spar with him because he had fights coming up. So I was like, yeah. So we used to spar together, and then he asked if I would do some pads with him and things. So it just developed from there, and then um, you know, we became friends, and then his brother came from Brazil, Hyan, and then also his other brother and his family members would come from different parts, and they would all start training, and I got to know everybody, and everybody was super welcoming and always just really good to me. So that's how I eventually ended up teaching there full time. It wasn't something I knew I was going to do, but I was very grateful for it. You know, it was
Yeah,
awesome.
it sounds like a classic story where, you're traveling around a bit and you've just ended up in the right place at the right time and you've met the right people. It's one of those stories of chance, really, isn't it? Or is it chance? I don't know. Is it fate? It depends whether you believe in that sort of thing, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, I suppose you know, personally, I can't speak for everyone, but like I'm very optimistic as a person, and I believe in personally my own experience. I just believe in being yourself, and like I was nobody else. I was nobody different in America than I was in Australia or in England. Like I was the same person, um, but the opportunities that were afforded me outside of my environment in Liverpool were different. But I wasn't different. You know, I didn't change to be anybody else. And I'm very confident that if you spoke to my family and my friends in Liverpool, they'll tell you the same thing. And one of the reasons I can say that is because I still am in very close with my friends and family in Liverpool, and I haven't lived there for over 20 years. But I make sure to keep myself. I haven't been back for a little while because I've had some situations here where I couldn't travel too much at times with work and stuff. But I'm as soon as the COVID thing is settled, I'm going to come back and see my family. But for the most part, I've been back to England once or twice, 3 times a year, every year. And in doing that, I feel like it helps you, keeps you grounded and stuff. But the same person I was at home in England, I am here in the States. And the reaction to that for me personally was a little different. And I don't put that down to culture, although that's definitely got something to do with it. I think it's economics. It's obvious. Like, I'm in a country with 350, 60, whatever it is, million people. And I'm in New York City, where it's like, pretty much the best of everything is here. There's the best of everything in other places in the world as well. But 100%, if you want to be really good at something, you could definitely probably find someone to show you how to do it in New York City. And a lot of people come here to succeed. I didn't come here to particularly succeed. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I wanted to come here, and it developed from that sense of curiosity to, New York took hold of me, and that attitude of optimism and enthusiasm really it met me and pulled me along with it, and it was perfect for me personally. I was like, oh, okay. A lot of people are like, not just how can I make money, but how can we make money? How can we succeed? What can we do together? And that collaboration was a nice thing for me. I wasn't necessarily as accustomed to that, because it's just, for me personally, I'm not talking bad about England, but it wasn't there for me. That was not my experience. Now, having said that, some of my friends have done very well back home, for themselves, and that's awesome. But for me, when I was young, I didn't feel that way. I was like, I wanted to go somewhere else to see what else there was, and definitely New York is definitely giving me that in abundance.
I think in being in a community where martial arts, jiu-jitsu and all those sort of things, and especially the academy where you're working as well, everything is all about a collective, a cohesive, basically like being in the Marines again, but not being in the military, where everybody's working together, everybody's working towards a common goal, whether it's training a fighter, whether it's getting better at jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, whatever it is that you're doing. And hopefully people are not in it for themselves if they're succeeding. So if they are succeeding and they know somebody and they think they're going to be good at something, then they're going to pull them along with it as well. Where I think where you're coming from, where you can be quite selfish, where you're trying to succeed yourself, and where you're trying to individually earn a living or put yourself on a pedestal and get yourself out of the box. Sometimes you forget about people, and I use the euphemism. It's a bubble. You have your bubble where your family's in it, maybe a couple of friends that are close friends. Anything outside that, you don't really collaborate with. Whereas, going back to what you're talking about there with being in the community where you are, everybody's in it together, aren't they? And that's a really cool thing, especially like in New York City, like you say, where there's so many people living on top of each other. If you don't pull together, then it's going to be quite difficult to succeed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the one thing for me as well, my observation, and a friend of mine said this, a very good friend of mine, it made a really good point, and I couldn't agree more with this point. I think it's important. When you come here, say to New York, or if you move to Australia or wherever it is you go, you're on your own for the most part. Like, I came here on my own. You're not with your family. You haven't got history here. And so there's positives and negatives to that. And one of the positives, I think, is that everything you do is about you. It's like you're not being pulled in different directions with the same responsibilities potentially that you would be if you were back in your original home. So like if your auntie's sick, or your brother or your best friend is this and that, and oh, something's happening. There's a lot of drama and things going on in life where you're just not there. You're not available for that. So someone else is doing that. And in the meantime, you're where you are in life, in the world at that moment. completely focused on whatever it is you want to do. And I think there's something to be said for that. And I think that a lot of people do that on purpose. They go somewhere because they don't want to have anything like that around them. They want to be focused on whatever it is they're doing. And somewhere like New York tends to attract people like that. But then you obviously that's not the, I don't think that's the healthiest way to live. So as you progress and have that kind of direct line towards whatever it is you're trying to achieve, you're going to meet people, and those people will become the family that you might not have around you. Those people will become the people that are required for you to maintain your sanity and to keep you um, in check sometimes, to keep you in a good place. Because New York's mad. You can do anything here, including fall apart and go the wrong way or not really be very happy with yourself. So I've seen that. I've experienced it to a small extent, but again, I think you made a good mention in the martial arts community is different generally, and for me, it's been, I say, it's inclusive and it's treated me, really well, and I've met some of the best people I've ever met through martial arts.
I think my jiu-jitsu instructor would kill me if I didn't mention. We talked about on a second podcast we did where he came out to Henzo's a few years ago now, maybe 5-10 years ago, when he was a brown belt. Do you remember a guy called Kenny Baker?
Oh, I know Kenny. Yeah, I know him a lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
know him well.
he was out there when Gunnar Nelson, they were both brown belts together.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he was. I mentioned that I was coming on to talk to you, and he was like that. He just put a bit of a smile on his face, and I was like, "Oh, right, okay."
Yeah, he's a good lad. Very good. He was a very hard worker and very diligent at Henzo's. I always liked Kenny. Good dude.
And like you say, he's one of those guys, and I think one of the few that, when you're talking about if you want to find somewhere to go and train and improve, and it's one of the better places to go, if you go there and you put the commitment in and you move out there somewhere like that. I'm not saying necessarily go out to Henzo's, but a good high profile academy or school where you're going to get with the top players and stuff. That's where you're going to improve the most. But saying that though, I mean, you look at next generation in the Wirral and Liverpool. Now, I'm not saying it's like not a top premium um, academy. But when I was I think I was a white belt. Well, basically, my missus, her family are from New Brighton.
Yeah,
So when I started doing jiu-jitsu and we used to go up there, I was trying to look for places to go, and they've got Paul Rimmer's got an academy up in Birkenhead. So
yeah,
I used to go over there, and I had absolutely no idea. He had fighters in the UFC and Cage Warriors, and top level guys. And then when I started seeing them going there, I was like, flipping heck, like this stuff is all over the place.
yeah,
And my point being is that you don't necessarily have to have those high level places, but as long as you've got the training partners that are worth, wanting to put the work in, and you can create that level yourself, can't you?
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I'm friends with Paul. I've got a great deal of respect for Paul. We were just in Abu Dhabi together, actually, for the
Yeah, that's
UFC.
kind of where I saw the photo. I saw you two together, and I was like, that. I know that bloke, and then I was like, that. No way,
Yeah,
it's Paul.
yeah, yeah. He's a top lad, and it makes me very happy to see the development that's happened since I left because it was just non-existent. You couldn't do that for a living because it just didn't exist. But now it does. You can be literally a full-time teacher, and even if you're not, you can go there and train 6-7 days a week, at a facility that's got high-level guys. And I mean, a lot of that, I'm not taking anything away from Paul or any of his boys or any of the other people in Liverpool. Darren Till's crew, and there's another lad, Jason Day, I think his name is. Um, but there's a bunch of guys out there doing really well. But it's also attributable to information. Like we're truly living in the information age, and never has more information been available to human beings before, and you can see it affecting everything. So people are a lot more educated, or they can be, and people can get more. information and do what they want with it than before. Because it's different if you don't have access to it. It doesn't matter what your abilities are if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not around people who can help you. But now it doesn't matter. I mean, this might be blasphemy for some people, but I don't care. I think it's absolutely 100% true. You could be a phenomenally good person at whatever you want to do simply watching YouTube. Like if you study film hard enough and then you go out there and practice what you're trying to do and diligently try and understand it, then you could be really good. Because there's a difference between being taught something and then analyzing it and teaching it to yourself. I think everybody, for the most part, usually needs some teachers, but it shouldn't be left down to that. You should take responsibility for your own progression and be like, okay, what can I do to help myself? Don't just sit there and be told what to do. Like, go away and think for yourself and be critical. And in doing that, I think you make yourself better at everything you do.
I think that's one of the key things as well with, and you're lucky in the way where, you teach, but you also train as well. I'm in a position
Yeah,
where I do a similar thing. I go and train jiu-jitsu. I teach jiu-jitsu as well to the lads within my unit. Have done since I was, a blue belt. And through doing that, but also the knowledge of the fact through my background, through teaching, taking recruits through training in the Marines, being a physical training instructor in the Marines as well, is that those key points where whether it's teaching a rifle lesson, teaching people how to survive in the wilderness, or teaching how to break contact in a firefight, or whether it's teaching a mount escape, it all comes down to the same sort of thing. It's how you put that information across and how the people that you're teaching absorb it. So when you're the teacher and you're teaching, you're also learning as well as doing it. And I think you learn a lot more through teaching, which I've definitely found. I found that I teach the way that my instructors teach me. And then in
yeah.
that way, when they're broken down that well, especially if you've got good teachers as well, then you can apply what they're teaching you and you teach other people. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you want to get good at something, you got to teach it because then it'll force you to analyze things much more deeply. Um, One of my most significant important teachers is John Danaher, and he'd said this to me maybe 15 years ago. We'd finished a private lesson, and it was just me and him in the academy. And afterwards, I went over and I asked him a question about what we were doing, and then he answered me. And then he said, because I was a coach then as well, I was teaching Thai boxing, and he said, Jamie, as a coach, you must understand the importance of what you're doing. He goes, you as a great teacher or as a good teacher or whatever you want to call yourself, if you want to maximize your potential, you're never teaching the student the thing that they're learning with you. You're never teaching them that. He goes, what you're doing is, if you really want to be good at what you're doing, he goes, you teach that person how they learn, because that's a lesson they'll take throughout their whole life. It's like, don't teach them the armbar escape. Yeah, teach them the armbar escape, but like you were saying, show them how to teach, and like that way they're really going to pay attention. And then when they really think about what you're doing, they're starting to understand themselves better, and then they realize how they learn. And if you can apply how you learn to everything you do, isn't that the point? Like you're supposed to be becoming a better person. And I feel like, don't teach people, don't just look at it in the shallow end, like, oh, this is what we're doing. No, I'm teaching you how you learn, and if you figure that out, the closer you get to understanding how you yourself learn things, surely that's going to make you better at everything you do rather than just the thing that you're doing.
Was John working there before you turned up and started training at Henzo's, or did he join like around about the same time, like coaching wise?
Now, John was already there. He just got his black belt. So I think he got
Okay.
his black belt for 6 months or something. So he'd been there probably about 7 years or something before me.
Yeah, I think that guy is probably underlying one of the most, what's the word? One of the most influential people on the planet at the moment with jiu-jitsu, but by like the top level guys. For somebody that doesn't compete or doesn't want to compete, the way that he puts things across in his breakdowns and stuff, people are just absorbing it at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, I've known him, well, almost 20 years, and like, um, he had a guy who come up with him called Sean Williams, who's just equally just brilliant. And again, I was lucky. I was there when they were there, and I've had John as a teacher for a long time, and Renzo as a teacher, and many other people as well have been absolutely, brilliant. Gene Dunn is another guy. I don't want to leave people out. Brian
That's a
Glick.
classic name, that, isn't it? Gene Dawn.
Yeah, Gene Dunn, Brian Glick, obviously Gary Tonin now, Gordon Ryan. Those guys who are coming up, but they're just really good teachers. And for me, that kind of sentiment, because John Danaher was he used to teach philosophy at Columbia University. He was doing his PhD, so he's
I'd never
still
have
teaching
guessed.
philosophy. Yeah, right. He's still teaching. Exactly. He's still teaching philosophy. He's just doing it with jiu-jitsu, He's a brilliant mind. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I'm going to the point that we were just talking about there. All those guys like Gary Tonin and Gordon Ryan, and they're good through teaching, and learning from John and doing it themselves. They've become influential people themselves too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got Naaman Gracie at the moment that you're training. Are there any other guys that you're looking to put through fights at the moment?
Yeah, I've got a couple of guys. There's a lad called Ryan Rizko and a guy called Hassan Abdullah. They both pro guys for me, and we're trying to get them in a card, maybe where are we? At the end of October. So we're looking to get those guys fights. So,
Nice.
and then some amateur guys too. But then
Have
maybe Naaman. You want to go at the end of the year? What? You want to fight at the end of the year? Yeah, maybe Naaman again at the end of the year if we can.
Oh, nice. Personally, what have you got going on? You got any cool stuff going on? In between like the fights, or are you just going to continue doing what you're doing, training, coaching, and getting guys to the cage? And
yeah, that's it really. To be honest, I'm boring. I don't do anything else. I just do that. I love it. You know what I mean? So, and with the situation, with the COVID, there's not much going on anyway. The city's very quiet. It's starting to slowly come back, but at the moment, the academy isn't open. So within the next few weeks, things will probably start to pick up again. But at the moment, I just have those plans to get those lads to compete, and then as the school opens, I'll be of whatever use I can to open up the school and then get back to teaching classes and things.
how's the COVID situation affected you? Because New York was one of the most hit places, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was tough. It's been difficult, to be honest. The school's been shut for nearly 7 months. So, restricting my ability to work, really. But I have been fortunate, like I say, where the UFC has been fighting. I had somebody fighting, so I was able to get one of my fighters to fight in Abu Dhabi, and then with Naaman competing, that was good. And then, occasionally you can do a little bit of work, bit of teaching privately. But it's been very tough, to be honest. It's been difficult, but that's life, right? You got to rise to the challenge. So things are
Improvise,
starting to move
adapt,
again.
and
So
overcome.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. Mate, thanks very much for talking to me, and give Naaman my best. I'm sure he doesn't need it, but yeah, he's going to smash him. Yeah, hopefully we'll get to talk again in the future, mate.
Yeah, I'd love that. That'd be great. I appreciate you asking me to come on and talk, because it's something I have a lot of passion about, and I really appreciate the relationship between the bootnecks and stuff. So that's awesome.
Yeah, mate. And I'll say a big thank you from the lads from my behalf anyway for sorting them out last year anyway when they were on the Virginia Gauntlet. That was really appreciated, and some of those experiences that I took away from that, are going to last for a lifetime, I think.
Yeah, I enjoyed that myself, mate. It was great to see so many good lads and people dedicated to jiu-jitsu as well. So it was really cool.
Yeah, cool. And hopefully next time you're back over, if you tap me up, might tie it in with coming up to see my in-laws, and we're going to have a beer or something.
Oh, I'd love that, mate. That'd be great. That'd be really cool, for sure.
Yeah, cool. Jamie, thanks for your time, and thanks for coming on the Grumpy Surfer podcast.
My pleasure, mate.
Cheers, buddy. After the podcast was recorded, Naaman Gracie defeated John Finch by submission, which is a credit to Jamie and the Renzo Gracie Academy coaches. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share and subscribe on your podcast provider, and also follow the Grumpy Surfer on Instagram. Thanks for listening.